but Ajibala.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much. Right. So, good evening, everyone. And for tonight's session, we'll continue with steps in building our automation framework, and we will looking into TypeScript fundamentals. So, before we even go into the content of tonight's slide, so I'll tell you, when working in any JavaScript framework, or when you're building your framework with JavaScript related libraries such as Playwright, Cypress, even Selenium, right? Because you can use Selenium with JavaScript. So, but JavaScript has a lot of issues. Like we've discussed some issues with JavaScript, that, for instance, the type system is not strict, so we can make a lot of mistakes, and we may not know until we execute our test. And as a tester, we want to prevent a lot of false positive tests, or tests that shouldn't pass, or tests that shouldn't fail that are actually failing. So we want to reduce the risk of having those in our code base. So, and one of the best way we can do that is by using the type system. So TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. So it's just like when you say you want to cook pepper, right? And you're adding sauce to it, right? Because the sauce makes it more interesting. Sorry, more sweet, let me put that way. So similarly, our type system in the JavaScript make the JavaScript way interesting to write. So, and for tonight's session, we'll look into introduction to TypeScript. We'll talk about the installation and setup of TypeScript, because it has a type and we need to compile our code. Then we'll talk about the type annotation basic. In fact, this is just what you need, the type annotation, understanding when to put our types and when not to put types. Then we'll look into functions, right? We'll talk about the object types, the array types, talk about the union type, which is not in JavaScript. We'll also talk about tuples and enums, which are also not in JavaScript. We'll look at classes and we'll look at different access level in our classes. We'll also look into generics and we'll look at what generics are, and we'll look into type narrowing and any question, and I'll try as much as possible to answer your question at the end of the session. So, what is TypeScript? So, like I said before, TypeScript is a strongly typed programming language that builds on top of JavaScript, so providing better tooling at any scale. And it's a superset of JavaScript. It adds static typing. It helps catch bugs at compile time. It makes code more predictable, maintainable, and self-documented. So let's take this superset of JavaScript. So the superset in the sense that even if we are writing TypeScript code, right, once we compile it, maybe using any tool, maybe ESBuild or Babel or whatever the new compiler is, we are actually producing a JavaScript under the hood, but the TypeScript make it more efficient and we write faster. Though being fast with TypeScript takes a while, because you need to be worried about the checks, about the types. But going forward in the future, since the types are complete, you know that there is no unseen error, and you can catch your error even before it gets to runtime. So it helps to catch error before catch bugs at compile time, even before you will have seen your error that, oh, this is not a type of this. And it was written by Microsoft, so Microsoft was on that road to Visual Studio Code. They made use of TypeScript, right? And they also was the one that designed language TypeScript. And what else again? So a lot of people, like the popular framework for the web, all make use of TypeScript. So for instance, Angular, React, Next.js, they all make use of TypeScript because it is way safe than JavaScript. So why should we use TypeScript? So one of the main reason, or the main reason, is to prevent runtime error. So like I said, we don't want any tests that shouldn't fail and it happens to fail. So we want to eliminate that. So we also have better IDE support. So for instance, the autocomplete, the type int, and in the world of AI, Using a TypeScript base, if you're working a TypeScript code base, it's very, very easy for the AI to actually analyze it, because it knows that, oh, if I put in A, I should be expecting A. If I put in B, I should be expecting B. If I put in the number, I should be expecting a number. It's not that I'll put in a number, then we'll be expecting undefined. So, and it works with all JavaScript framework, React, Angular, Node, Playwright. So any framework that doesn't work with it, it's actually an outdated framework. So you just check when it was designed. It was probably designed, or the last update was probably before um um TypeScript was created, or just after or before TypeScript became stable, because in the world of programming, we make use of stable and unstable. Some, I don't know if you use iOS, but when you look at the first version of the maybe iOS Tao, it was so unstable that a lot of people couldn't read, but now it has gotten better. So our tester, so we ship in products, we do the alpha and the beta testing. So that's how it works also in TypeScript. So TypeScript was not really good. Like it was um the performance, since it had to compile to JavaScript, it wasn't really as efficient as how people wanted it. That companies like Netflix had to leave it for some while and started writing pure JavaScript, because they found that it was um way cheaper when it comes to serving it, and it was also way performance. So those are the minor cases where you may need to um so that's are just the minor cases where you may need to use JavaScript over TypeScript. But generally speaking, the TypeScript is a better one. So how does the TypeScript work? So what we currently write is the TS file, right? The TypeScript compiler convert them to JS. Like I said, you I won't call it compile, or rather I'll call it transpile. So you make use of a transpiler. So a transpiler is um in programming, it means that it takes a high level language and converts it to another high level language. So that is a transpiler. And we have a compiler from high level language to a low level language. And we have also an interpreter. So it be asking your interview, what are the difference between a transpiler, a compiler, and an interpreter. So an interpreter look at code line by line. So if you look at our JavaScript, the code doesn't fill. It doesn't build before it fills. The code reads line by line. That's why we can have one, we have good, and the next one doesn't get printed, as we just get an absurd amount of error. But the case is different in TypeScript, because it's make use of a compiler, or rather a transpiler. So it catches our error very quickly. And browsers can only run JavaScript. So and TypeScript give your code, make your code safer before code execution. So that's, but generally our browsers such as um Chrome, Firefox, they can run JavaScript natively. So, in order to for us to work with TypeScript, there are only two things we need to have in our system. The first one is Node.js, or rather the JavaScript runtime environment in our case, which we've installed already, and the code editor, or a IDE, and VS Code is also recommended. So Node.js, but we don't necessarily need Node.js. So there are different runtimes such as Born, which is way efficient than Node, but Node is way common. So I think Node has very large ecosystem. So bugs are very easy to fix in Node compared to Born, which just later got acquired by this AI company. So one very big AI company anyway. So those got acquired recently. So in order for us to install TypeScript, so we just need to create a new project. We'll do npm init y. So the init means initialization, and the y means yes, means that we should accept the default, right? Then we should do npm install TypeScript. So we can do install TypeScript, right? And we can also do install TypeScript save dev, or D for short. So it's either we add it as dev dependencies, or we add it as a normal dependencies. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and I'll bring out my Visual Studio. So this is my Visual Studio code. I'm just going to create my, so I don't want to use this one. So I can, So I can come here and sorry, bad. Sorry. File, I say open folder. So I can just put a new folder. I call it TS, so TypeScript for short. So I'll select this folder. So I've created a new folder, just like how the guy said. Then after you've created a new folder, the first thing you do is to bring up your terminal. But since we've not installed the proper PowerShell, so we need to update it to the so I currently have Git installed, so I can either use the Git bash or the command prompts. But for this session, I'll use the command prompts for it. Okay, so the first command is to do, or the next one is for us to do npm init y. So we need to initialize. So do npm init y. So we're going to accept the default and we're going to create a package.json. So this is what where we manage our dependencies. Then the next one is going to be, so we want to install TypeScript, right? So this is one way we can do it. So I'll just clear the terminal. So I'm installing TypeScript right now. So as you can see, we have node module. And if I come down to the package.json, as you can see, it has come here as a dev dependency because I use the dev, save dev here. And for short, we can use the D. So you may be asked in your interview. So that is another one. So the next one is npm tsc init. So npx, I mean, so npx tsc 19. Okay, good. So we've created a new TS config. So this is where we can put our configuration for TypeScript. So as you can see, we have a lot of, so this is just for configuration. So the default is okay, but we can look at the types, we can install the types, we can look at the root directory, we can also look at the file directory. So that is an easy one. Then I will do npx tsc. So we're going to run the npx tsc. So this is, there is no input were found in the configuration file, blah blah blah. Include paths. So it told me to include our paths. So if you look at paths, or if you look at our include method, so include, no, there is no include. So I could put an include. So this is my include path. So the paths. So default. So let me work. So we don't put the include. So save it. Let me create our new TypeScript file called index.ts. So TS is what differentiates TypeScript from JavaScript. So then I can do log. So in order to run it now, sorry. So as you can see, it has. So if we look at npx tsc, so as you can see, it has created my JavaScript. As you can see, it has this key use strict. So this is what is going to run LOTS. As you can see, LOTS. But as you can see, it has to compile it. But the sweet part is we have a lot of types. So, and now once it has compiled it, we can come here, right? And we can index. Mm. So as you can see, I'm running index.js. I think it should support index.cs. Okay, now it supports index.cs now. So but in the previous version of Node, it didn't support it until I think version 22 point something. So we don't need to actually compile it. Node is going to do that in memory. Well, once you compile it, this is what you have. Okay, I'm going to delete this unnecessary code. So I'm going to move to recycle. So we just have the index and we can work with our TypeScript from here. So we can just use the node. So if I don't want to repeat that, so I could just come here in our script. So this is the script that when we do npm run test. So if I run test, because test is part of our script, I click on enter. So as you can see, echo error, no test specified, and exit one. So it's actually printing what it is there. So if we want to run our node, in order for us to run our node index.ts, right? All we could do is change this to dev rather than doing node index.ts every time. So if we don't remember the ts, then we can put node index ts. So if I do npm run dev, and then just put so as you can see log message. So console.error is just to show error, and console.log is just to give a log file. Or so there are different classes in the console. So we can have count, debug. So we can have debug, and it's used when we're debugging. So if I run it, I'm still going to get similar output, but they're intended for different thing. Oh my god, sorry about that. Okay. Okay. We'll stick with log. So that is TypeScript in a nutshell. So that is just installation and the compilation of TypeScript. As you can see, TypeScripts need additional compilation. That's why I said big organization like Netflix actually had to abandon um TypeScript and probably React. Yeah, they use TypeScript with React for some of their projects, not all of them. Okay, but I read an article that says that I don't know how true it is, but because of it takes time to um compile. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Okay, so we've seen how TypeScript run and we've run a file TypeScript. So now we're going to look into function. So and in TypeScript, like I said, the only difference is the type, but we have other advantages. So the first one is when we have a type parameter. So I'm going to use a JavaScript file also to demonstrate the type or the advantage of the type. So we're going to have similar files or similar um stuff, but they are going to be different. So I'm going to start with the index or the JavaScript, like we already know how it works. So let's say we have a function now. So this is a function. We call it greet. The parameter is a name. So we want to say print, sorry, log. I'm going to use the backtick. Yeah. Let's say good morning. Good morning. Then space and the curly brackets name. So in this our scenario, the name can be anything. So if you look at the name, it has a type of any. So this is the default that JavaScript actually work with. So JavaScript doesn't really care if this is undefined, if this is null. So now let's say I do function, sorry, function. Let me call greet, then let me just call the greet alone. So this is going to be fine, right? Undefined because we didn't pass any parameter here. Well, this is not necessarily good because it's maybe undefined is someone username. Are we talking to this user or are we talking to someone else? So this is not a good code. So now if I copy the same thing, right, and I pass it to, so mind you, there's no way for me to tell the user that, oh, you need to put your name unless I do additional checks. For instance, like if name is undefined, blah blah blah, then throw an error that name is undefined. But with TypeScript, right, once I paste the same code, like I said, all valid JavaScript is TypeScript. It's telling me that the name has any type and it's red because it's, it doesn't mean that it's not going to work. But as you can see, this is type error. So I could just put the type, oh, our name should be of type string, right? Because we want to pass in a username. And now it says we want an argument for the name, which is this one, right? The parameter name, we want an argument here, and it was not provided, so it's an error, right? So we can pass in James. So if I clear this one and I just, so I run npm run dev. So I can say good morning, James. So have you seen the difference now? This was able to catch the error. No, some people argue that, oh, yeah, this thing should be able to run. Yeah, it can run fine. Like I said, any valid JavaScript, it should be fine. But I think we need to put any. So if I run this same code, right, I'm still getting the same thing, right? Because, so in case you didn't get that, so I still got the same thing I got in JavaScript. Like I said, JavaScript is just TypeScript. I'm sorry, TypeScript is just JavaScript under the hood with additional types safety. So we're still getting the same thing. So all valid JavaScript can work in TypeScript, but not all valid TypeScript are JavaScript. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So, but this is giving red. You know that, oh, you're expecting something that the user should not give it empty. So, and you don't need, so you can decide to be strict. So there are different ways to set up your linting, right? So talked about linter a little bit. So you can you can enforce this properly with a linter. So some organization does that with the help of a linter. So this is just the comparison, as you can see. So we'll keep doing on with the next function. So the next one is optional parameter. So the way optional parameter now works with, let's use the same grades. So I'm going to work. So JavaScript doesn't have optional parameter because by default it is undefined, right? It is optional by default. We don't need to necessarily put it. But if we want to put an undefined statement here, what we could put is string. This is the question mark and the colon sign, which signify undefined. So if I do greet optional, as you can see, there is no error anymore. It's working as if it is JavaScript. So that is the optional. So by default, our JavaScript is optional, meanwhile, or any, right? And our TypeScript is typed false unless you set it that, oh, I want this to be any, or I want this to be optional. But by default, it should have a proper type. So, and our greet can only accept string. So we'll talk about the union type later on. So, or it can accept an undefined. And if you look at this, this is like any. So, and by default, our any type is giving us undefined. So it's kind of different, but they're the same thing. But that is true. So if what happens if I try to put a number? Now I get an error also because our name is an optional. Either we put is like a position, like is either first or nothing. Like so, is either we put a string or we don't put anything. But this time we're putting a number. So it is not assignable, right? Well, if I put that in JavaScript, right, 100, it's going to accept it the way it is. So that's the beauty of TypeScript. So that is the optional parameter. So the optional is the name of the parameter and sorry, and the question mark, then the colon, then the data types you want to put or you want to accept. So the next one is the default parameter. So there may be some time where you want a default parameter to be in your method or your function. And for instance, if we have a fixed tax rate, or if the employee has a fixed monthly wages or fixed weekly wages or hourly wages, and we know that that doesn't need to be changed unless maybe there is bank holiday that the hourly charges can double. And that's in the UK. So in that scenario, we can just use a default parameter. So how it works is going to be function. So we'll start with our function keyword. We can say calculate wage. Then the first parameter we're going to pass in is going to be the hours, right? So this can be any hour, and our hour is of type number because we want to multiply it, right? And the next one is going to be rates or hourly rates, would be of type example. So sorry, equals to. So I use the equals to sign to sign it. Then our hourly rate is going to be, let's say the person is earning £13 per hour. So this is a different, and you can see this is a number. So with the help of Visual Studio, you can quickly detect what your types are. Then I could calculate the wages and says, and just simply return now, hours times hourly rate. Let's say taxes were not involved, and we get our value. So meaning that we don't necessarily need to pass in our calculate wage. So like I'm passing 12. So we don't need to pass in our, let's say the user work for 12 hours, right? So we don't need to work passing how much the person earn. But let's say when December period the person is probably on bank holiday, let's say the person is earning times 2. Or let's say another maybe absorb sort of money, maybe £100. So as you can see, we can also decide to pass it. So it seems like an optional, right? But it is not an optional because in the first optional, this doesn't take a default value. The default value becomes an undefined. But this optional has a default value, which is more safe. It has a number because, for instance, if we don't pass in maybe we pass in undefined and we do number times undefined, I'm probably going to get like an undefined JavaScript word. Well, that is not what you want, right? So in this scenario, we can use a um, a default parameter, and it's available in other languages like C#, but it's not available in Java, at least to my knowledge. So not all languages support some interesting TypeScript features. So just watch out once you're trying to transfer your skills to other languages. So that is default parameter. So the next one is going to be the function types. So this is rarely used, right? You will rarely use this one. So I just talked about of touching it. So I'm going to delete this one. So let's say we have so let's just call it calculate equals to, it takes in x comma y, then we return x plus y, right? Then this we're going to give it a type of number, right? And this is also going to be a type of number. So this is our calculate, right? So this is very useful once we want to do mathematical operation. So if I do calculate 2 comma 3, so this should give us the sum of 2 comma 3, and it returns a number, right? As you can see. So This is just a fancy arrow method, a very fancy one. So, and I can print out this result. So I can log it out on the console. The commentary. So the result should be 5. So if I clear 8, so as you can see, the result is 5. So similarly, I can update this value and I can say, oh, you know what, I want to calculate should be the subtraction. So I say x is also a number and y is also a number. And I want it to return x minus y. So let's say this is the subtract. So I made it. So constant, so we can update it. So and it's going to work similarly. As you can see, it's just a arrow function in the wood. So there's nothing special other than it's way fancy and it's just one line of expression, one line our function. So you can use it, you can apply it. And as you notice something, there's a single return value. So this arrow means it's returning this. So and once I put my it's also showing that it's a function, but it's just a fancy function. So and if I print out 2 minus 3, I should have -1. Okay, so that's going to be about function, right? So I would continue the slides. And so we talked about object, how we can store different data type in an object. So one, the object type is a little bit interesting, but the only difference is we need to just specify a type. So the object type now, there are 3 main types. The first one is the basic one where everything is required. The second one is the optional where we can have the defaults, where we can have some values that are required and some values that are optional. And the third one is the read only. These are values that we know that cannot change. And this is usually maybe like the value of pi. It doesn't change. It's 3.4, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't change. So let's see that in action. So let's talk about the basic object types. I'm going to delete this. So generally speaking, an object is just a group of data together. So I'm going to use a constant keyword. So let us call it person. So what does a person have? So let us use the JavaScript way. So a person would have a name, right? And this name is going to be a string. Okay. Why am I getting them? So we can't do it this way. So let's just call the person let's say the age is 4, then the in age, then address or location is, let's say, London. So let's say this is the person profile and this is the data we have. So if I put my cursor there, look at, we have this as a type. So I could copy this, right, and still come back and do it this way. So I still don't get any error. But let's say this is my type. So anywhere you see a colon, this is our type, right? That is before the data declaration, just like how we have constant name equals to colon string equals to a. So anything after the variable name and we have a colon, anything here is considered a type. So because I didn't mention that before. So now in our scenario, this is the type. So what happens if I remove the location? Right. So if I remove the location, you can tell me that the location doesn't exist in this type, right? It doesn't know if the location actually exists in this type. So as you can see, that is also another benefit of the TypeScript. So first, well, the same thing, if I copy it here and delete what we currently have and I put it in JavaScript, the JavaScript doesn't understand typing. So in that scenario, we just need to remove the colon, right, and remove everything before the equals to, put it the equals to. Then if we put our person, it's because, so you may be seeing a type because of the, like I said, Visual Studio Code is written in TypeScript, so it understands, it can infer some of our basic types. But generally speaking, TypeScript is even way safer than JavaScript. So I could decide to remove the type, and once I remove the type, it's going to have an implicit type. So it has an implicit type. Well, we don't necessarily need to put the type. For instance, in an object that is as ugly as this, we have a different type. So I'll show you a different way of putting this type, and it's going to be more neat. We talk about interfaces and type itself. So these are basic type anyway. So back to the object. So, and in this scenario, we can access the user profile. Maybe I want to print out the name of the person. So the person dot name, right? So as you can see, the person dot name is way clearer. But if I come here and I do the log of person dot, right now I can see it. But when we have complex objects, we won't be able to see because we don't know the type of the system. So it will be like any, just like my playwright now was type of page, but it doesn't provide me the properties of page. So I'm going to show you that, and we'll also look at TypeScript in the world of playwright. Okay, you see the difference. So if I run this one right now, if you to get my 𝐂𝐎𝐍𝐍𝐄𝐂𝐓, because 𝐂𝐎𝐍𝐍 is the name of the user or the person name. Similarly, I can access my age and my location. So let's say we also want to have a default parameter. Sorry, the default a optional parameter. Let's say location is not necessary. So once I put my cursor on location now, so as you can see, it is question mark, and the location is also a question mark string. So I don't necessarily need to define my location. So my location can go missing this time. And anytime I try to print out location, right, is available, right? But that doesn't mean that we need to set it. So if I clear this terminal and I run it, oh my god, sorry. So if I run it, then I should have undefined, because by default, similarly, if I don't set my location, and I try to access the location, I should be having the location is not available. When I try to the location, but as you can see, the location is not available here, but the location is available here. It tells me that it is either a string or undefined. So as you can see, this is, I hope the difference is really getting clearer. So the location is any. We don't know if it's a string, we don't know if it's a number, and in fact, it's not even defined, because it is not defined here. But here, we know that our location is optional. Person doesn't need to provide his address or his location. Okay, so and similarly here to also go to get undefined. So JavaScript hardly throw any error. So I think that's one of the beauty, also one of the downside of JavaScript. So and you can also have read-only properties. So maybe, for instance, now we can, let's say we didn't set the age, we had an error. I'm just going to duplicate this one. Then and now to update the person dot location equals to Newham. So let's say the person lives in Newham, right? So I'm going to clear my terminal, then I'm going to run it. So as you can see, the first part, I don't know if you can see properly, but the first part is undefined because we didn't set the location. The second part is Newham. So what happens if we don't want the user to change their age? Maybe we don't want the user to change their age. So one way we do it is by using the read-only property. So once I say read-only, that means you can't update your the property. So right now it's not showing as read-only, but once we try to maybe update the age, since age is a string, let's say we want to put the age. So there's an error that says cannot assign to age because it is a read-only property. So maybe though it's rarely used because JavaScript is flexible, but sometimes where you don't want something to be changed once you have set it. So maybe you're trying to run a test and you found that something is changing, but it shouldn't change. So in your test, you decide to like create a strict type and ensure that it is only read-only. You cannot update it once you've gotten the data, right? Once you've set the data. In that scenario, if the data try to change, your program is going to inform you that, you know what, there's an issue with the code, and this should be in line with your user story that says that, oh, users shouldn't be able to update their username. So something like that. Maybe user cannot update their email because we want a genuine email. We don't want people to change their email due to fraud in life. But generally speaking, that is when we want to use it. So that is the type of the object type that we can have. So let's continue. So the next one is arrays. So we talk about array is a group of data type, right? And similarly, so everything we've been talking about has always been type. We just need to ensure that we know which type we are putting, right? So what are typed array, or rather the default ways of defining array um in TypeScript? So we just use the colon and we'll describe the type of the array we are looking into or putting. So for instance, if we have ages, we can just put the number of brackets. If we have names, we can use the string brackets. Then if we have profile, we can use the person object square bracket of the person. So let's see that in action. What's my screen? So let's say okay. So I'm going to come back to this object because we can have array of anything. Let's say let's let's use the constant keyword, constant ages of colon square brackets. Um, but so this is equals to 10, 20, etc. So what happens if I try to add a string? Tell me that the string is not assignable to a number. Like I said, array is a um group of the same data type. But unfortunately, with our JavaScript, yeah, if we do the same thing here and we remove the type, it's accepted, right? Imagine we want to do data manipulation with this. Maybe we want to add card or do something, or maybe we want to buy the stock and we're getting string as part of our stock and we're just getting an empty string. Obviously we don't want it in our value, or it shows that there's a bug in the system. So it can mean different thing. Okay, so that is why you may need a string type. As you can see, this has a string or a number, so this is a union type. Okay, please, so it just assume that. So by default, have this in mind. JavaScript assume the type of any. Okay, so because it can be any type, it can be undefined, no, anyone. So you can't assign it, so we're going to remove it. But another thing again is that array is not restricted to just the person type or just the number or string type. So we can have booleans, right? We can have nulls, so we can have an array of nulls. Okay, so another type is we can also have an array of this exact type. This type can have an array. So to declare that, let's call this constant people of types. So what is the type now that we need? Let's just take this one. So as you can see, this is a type on its own, right? And I'll talk about how we can group them together properly to make it monitor. And we can add, so we can add this person. So if I add the person, as you can see, this person is actually accepted. Or if I add a number, then tell you that number is not type of this type. Okay, so but in real world scenario, we make use of an interfaces or a type to actually achieve this ugly looking code. So the next one is the generic array. So back to the types and system. So there's a class called array. So well, this is going to be more clear when we do generics. When we get to the generic section. So if we do constant ages, we can still use the ages, right? But now we want to give it an a type of the array. So as you can see, it tells us it is a generic type and it's also an interface. So we'll talk about what interfaces are later on. And so our T is going to be number, and because we want to store the number type, and we can put in equals so I can put in 10, 20, or 30, anyone. And as you can see, we come back to this, right? Remember how we had it before? We had it like this. And let's put H1. So equals to 10. So this is the generic way, or rather the old way, or the ugly way. This is the neater way to do it. As you can see, this we just need to put a square bracket in front. And by default, TypeScript has unit type, so we don't necessarily need to put it as long as we are sure of the type 100% sure. So we don't need to put it, but for good practices, you can put it sometime. But when dealing with primitive data type, at least the known primitive data type, then we can put it. Okay, so and that is the generic. Then we can have read-only array. So the difference is just going to be the keyword read-only. So that has always been the difference. And when you see read-only, anyway, you just see read-only, just know this should be read-only. I can't update the value. So I can only read, like it says, read-only. So this is a very important one. Like I said, when you don't want anything to change, that's when you use it. So it's way strict than constant, because constant here, assuming we don't have read-only, I can update the value of 10, 20, add to the arrays. But if it's other program language, it won't allow. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So I'll continue with the current slides. Then, okay, let's look into the union type. So we may want to combine multiple data types together for best performance. For instance, we know that our data type, the age of the user or the currency can actually be a string, probably if it's not well formatted, or a number, right? So in order to ensure that we work properly with it, we can do a union type. And the union type is just the data type we want to share separated by a line. So each of them are going to be separated by a line. So in a nutshell, we can use it with a simple variable. We can also use it with a function, and not just function, anything that can accept type is possible with it. So in this example, I just show with the function and also show with the variable. So in our scenario, let's say we want an array of number. So let's say we can also do an array string. As you can see, is either we have an array of string or an array of number. So don't confuse this. This is just the old way of writing, or the generic way of writing it. This is the proper way or the modern way of writing it. So similarly, I could do a generic on this and just put in string. So meaning that our ages can also be a string. So if I put ages, this one, I can assign a value of now. Sorry, it is read only, that's why. So if I remove the read only property, then I think I should be able to do it. And this read only should still work. Sorry. So now, so if I print out ages one from here, log it to the console, and also log it in the ending. So we should have the array and we should have the NA over here. So we should have 10, 20, 20 and NA. So as you can see, this is, and like I said, it's used for joining complex types together. Now, but this is type and a union. So we can, like I said, to also work with functions. So I don't think we need to go over it again. But it's just in our parameter that we put in there. Not only functional, not only a optional, we can also put, or a default value, we can also put in a type. Now, let's see. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So we talk about tuples and so a tuple is similar to a type, but is a fixed length array with known types. So some people don't really consider it a tuple, like the way Python has it, but some people still consider it a tuple. But generally speaking, you rarely use it. I think you are good with just the square brackets. Sorry, with just the line, because that is way easier to work with, manipulate. But let's see that in action. Right. So I is string of number equals to mm, so now that I did a wrong variable type, it's telling that it should be string before a number. So let's see what happens when I put a string, then put a number, fine, because this is a tuple. So a tuple, in a nutshell, is just something that returns exactly two same type. Sorry, two types of data. So it can be that be a string and a string. So if I change here to a string and a string, so here needs to be a string, right, for it to work. So, and this is very useful. Maybe you want to return an error or a null. So, and this is common in functional programming. So, where we have something like this function, let's say, get name. So, we can pass in the name. The type is a string, right? So, it's either the name is correct. So I can use the square brackets for I can put in the string here or another or a. Now this is where it gets better. So either a string or um, another. So now because we're not returning, that's why it is. So as you can see, because we're not returning the proper time. So if I return um Kali, then also return successfully. So as you can see, this one is to hold the exact name of the user, and this one is to hold if the error message, if we have an error message or a successful message, or if our error message is no. So it depends on how you want to configure your code, but like I said, it is very configurable. As you can see, these are types that you never see in majority of the programming language. Okay, the flexibility TypeScript gives us is not, it's just unmatched. Like seriously, it's just unmatched. So and I want to apply. So it's not something that we use here, but it's not something that we use every day. So let's keep that in mind as possible. So we have the enum type. So if we don't want to use this type, right? So this is our function. Let's say we don't want to use this type. We want to use another type. This is where the grouping comes into place. Enum. Let's say we want an enum of let's say messages. So let's say we can have successful. We can have failed. So let's say this is the so let's say I don't want it. So I want it to be of type message. So we can also make it of type messages. So, and from here, rather than dot successful, I'll just change it from successful alone to messages dot successful. So this is using multiple types with the same type. So I know you may get confused, but with time and practice, you'll be able to see the beauty of it. As you can see, the type system is just amazing. So we have messages is an enum, right? Tell you that, oh, this is an enum. And other messages we have successful, we have failed, we have in progress. As you can see, so Scali, we're able to successfully get Scali name, then that is why we're returning Scali and also return successful. So and if I do if I do get name, and I pass in value. So rather than using name here, so let me just use name. Right. So now get name. So get name returns a string or a value to dots. So and it is an array. This is how we have. So is either 0 or we have or 1. So 0 is the string which happens to be our name, and the 1 is the enum, which is the message. So I can put either want to get 0. So as you can see, we have square bracket 0 to access our index, or 1 to access the current status in the message. Okay. So this is how we use our type system. So now we've seen how enum can be used, and this is a simple way of using enum. So another way we can group our type is going to be using the interface. So the interface is actually way useful. So we can have an interface of user. So we could say a user should have a name, and the name is of type string, right? A user should have an age of type number, a small number, a location of type string. So this is the user interface. This is these are grouping of different data type. But what makes the interface very amazing is that we can have message, we have message. So let me just call it a single data because we can only have one at a time. So we can even have all that data type inside the interface. So though it's not really common for all the testers to actually use the interface because we can use it, we use it, but it's not really as common because the simple type system is what we really work with. We don't do something as complex as the developer. So we can also have a function in an interface. For instance, we can have a click. So this means that it's going to take in 0 parameter and going to return the void. So maybe we want to click on the user screen, on the maybe user profile. So this are interface, like I said, it takes in all the it takes in different data type. So it can take in an enum, it can also take in another interface. Maybe you want to subdivide, maybe we have another interface. We have something called address, right? And we want this to be an interface. So we can do interface address. Interface of address. So we can have the address, you can have streets, so a string. So and if you look at the address, it's an interface, and we have the user.address. So this is how we use it. So this is just very simple interface. So another one we have is type. So we have something called type. So type is similar to an interface. So I'll just comment this out, right? So basic sign is number one. We use it equals to, so and the rest can remain the same. So you may be asking what's the difference between interface and type. So the type is way advanced than the interface, right? So I don't know how I'm going to put the concept, but also that the type can even do way amazing things than the interface. Yeah. So, but as you can see, the only difference in their syntax is the type. We have interface here. Age. So, and in order for me to everything I can do here, I can also do in my type. Okay, so just have that in mind. So this is a type. So it's a type. So and if I then just put user one, if I implement out this one, then tell me that this is a user, is an interface user. So But like I said, the type where you can prefer interface or type, anyone you want. So use some organization, you can see type, you can see interface. They can basically do the same thing. But I think the type is way complex than the interface. So this is just type. So this is the way we can group different data type. So it's either we use an enum, we use the interface, or we use the type. So that is the type system in a nutshell. So next one is going to be classes. So the only difference is the access modifier. Really, like that's really difference, the access modifier. So what I mean by access modifier is the public, which means you can access it everywhere. The private, it means you can only access it inside the class, and the protected means that you can um work with it inside the class or the subclasses. So the subclass means the derived class. So we'll talk about inheritance in detail later. So this is our, I'm going to remove this now. So I'm going to start with a class called animal. Our constructor take a parameter, yes. So an animal can have a name of type string, right? And this name is going to be private because we don't, let's leave it as public first. Then you can have in the name dot name because we, so that is how we initialize since in JavaScript. So meaning that an animal can have a name. So an animal can also have an habitat. So let's leave that for now. So, so this is the name. So the only difference is this. So if I create a new object, so I can do let animal equals new. So use new keyword for classes animal, then we pass in a name. So what is the name? Let's call it dog. So let's say we are creating an animal of type dog. So let us log out the animal, or let us log out the animal dot name. So right now I can access it because it is public by default. So I'm quickly going to run this up. So I'm going to run this. So as you can see, we have the animal and the name is a dog and the name is also a dog. Let's say I don't want this to be accessed. The name should not, maybe because I don't want people to change it or due to my design pattern. So one way I can achieve that is by using the private method. So once I make it private right now, as you can see, there's some red line. So I can't access it. So I can try to access it. So when I try to run it, so I'm still getting a dog because, like I said, everything is. So if I compile it, you see that it's still going to be JavaScript under the hood. So, but generally speaking, what you can see, it is private and it's only accessible. So it's going to just tell you, but it can't force you. So just like, oh, you can take the maybe the horse to the water, but you can't force it to drink. So it can tell you that, oh, this shouldn't be accessible because this is your design partner, but it can't really force you because under the hood we're compiling back to JavaScript, and JavaScript, as we know, is not type saved. Okay, so that is why we're able to access it, but generally speaking, it shouldn't be accessible, or in other programming language it shouldn't be accessible. So just keep that in mind. And the constructor is just this. So anywhere you have a bracket in the class is a constructor. Because of our name is a string, that is why our dog is a string. So if I pass in a number here, maybe I pass in 10, I'm going to get an error. So just keep that in mind. Our constructor is the circle bracket, or is everything within the circle bracket. This is our constructors. And if we have multiple constructors, like for instance, if we have maybe age of the animal, it's a number. So as you can see, this is expect two arguments, but only got one. And if this is JavaScript, we'll get a undefined since we didn't put the number for the age of the animal. So I'm just going to put 10. So my dog is 10 years. So and I see I have this same error, but it's going to work as expected because as you can see, just because of you are using task doesn't mean that you're going to have an exception. At the end of the day, TypeScript is JavaScript under the hood. So so we can inherit class. So let's now inherit the class. Let's talk about inheritance. So we may need to inherit some properties from it. So let me just make this public. We need to inherit some properties from a parent class. Like we're going to use that in our design pattern. So let's say we want to inherit the dog. We want to inherit the name from the dog because the dog is an animal, and we also want to inherit a method called move. A log moving. So let's say this is the move method. So let's say we don't want to repeat it again. Maybe we want to create another for dog, another for cat, another for, I don't know, different animal, lion. So if we don't want to repeat ourselves, right? So one way we can do it is by using the class, so that we can inherit the class we want to inherit from. So first, for instance, we can have a dog that, so we use the extend keyword. So we extend the animal class. So now we still there's an error. So if we're extending and we have a constructor, so we must call the super. So if I do a quick fix, add the super call. So it's going to call our super, and our parameter should be the same or even more. So but right now we're only passing the name and we're passing the age. So I want to pass the name and the age. So that is it to parameter we're expecting from. The name is a type of string and the age is a type of number. So this is the two things we're expecting. So anytime we're going to be using the inheritance, we need to call the constructor. In order to call the constructor of the parent class, we use the super. So we use the super to get it of the super class, parent class, or base class. Well, I prefer base class. So we can call it parents. Well, in some terminology, some people prefer to call it super class, base class, and this dog is a child class or the derived class because it's getting some properties of an animal. So a dog is a type of an animal. Animal is not a type of a dog, right? Well, a dog is a type of an animal. So that's just the difference. So, so this is just, and in order for me to test the inherited property, so I could also create a dog. So I'll pass in what's the name of the dog. So the name is going to be Jack, and the age is going to be, oh yes. So this is my new dog, and to prove that we've inherited some properties, I'm going to do dog dot name now for the method. So this is a method in the parent class. So if I do control and click, I'm going to go to the parent class. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to print out the, so as you can see, dog.move is moving. Similarly, if I created a class for cats and I put in cats and I change this one to cat and I put in cats and I'll do the name and I do cat.move, I should also get moving. So that is the basic functionality of the class, and we'll get to see how we use it as we build our automation framework. So that is inheritance in a nutshell. So we are just inheriting some properties from the parent class. So now generics. I'll say this is my favorite part of TypeScript. Generics makes our code reusable across multiple types. So, for instance, we can have generic. So anywhere we see like an angle bracket and there's a type inside it, that is called a generic. But generic is I'll say one of the core functionalities of multiple software. For instance, it's like our type system in the sense that we can have multiple types, right? And we don't need to have multiple types. We can just put it in generic like that. We don't need to remember the type. So it's one way for us to say, you know what? It is like an any, but it is not an any, right? So and by default, like in some languages like Java, the default is like an object, so which is a generic class. So we'll look into generic class and we'll talk about generic function also. That would the class. So talk about generic class first. So let's say this our animal now is a generic class. I'm going to remove the dog class. We don't need the dog. So let's say our animal is generic. So this is T. So T is useful, but it can also be called it can't be called type, sorry. It was TY, but then it's called T. So the T stands for type. Our name can be of type T, right? This is a type, so it shows an any type, and our name can also be of type T, right? And this is going to work. So I do need to do string uh, number interface XYZ. So I could just use a generic since I know that I'm expecting a different data type for my name. And to prove that this is going to work, so I could just come back and create a animal type. First name animal. Then I can pass in the name. As you can see, it's an unknown because we don't know the name. So I pass in a string. So right now, instantly it has been updated to a string. So I can pass in um let's say you want to create a cat class and pass in n. Then so you can see our name is a string. So we don't need to worry about other properties. And this is the beauty of generic. So like I said, generic is you will not need it. Like I said, the basic type system is going to be is good enough. Or if you are going to be building your maybe tomorrow you are okay, you know what, playwright is not really good. You want to build my own playwright tomorrow, then yeah, these are the features you're going to be using because you will know that there's a lot of limitation with the current type system. Because now imagine we want to have multiple type of this, then it's not possible. It's going to make our code base messy. Then we just need to add in a type parameter. And that type parameter is going to be used everywhere. And anytime I call the class, so that's another way. But I don't need to necessarily put it. Like I said it's optional. I'm going to put it, and I'm still going to get the string. So this is, and similarly, it also work in function. Let's say a function, let's say we have another function called talk, or and this, okay, so it also takes in t, the words t, so it takes in t as our word. Now say we're going to log out name, this dot name, only want to say this is what I'm speaking, which word is it speaking. So I'll just call my animal and do animal dot speak. So as you can see, now pass in what I want it to speak, a string. So I don't need to set in my string anymore because we have it generic, and that's the same type T that we're using. Okay, but there are downside to using generics, but this is the beauty of generic, right? We can use a type. This type we can use it anywhere in our class. Okay, so and this is how we use it in function, and this is how we use it in a class. So, this is it. So we can have a value. This is the return type, which is T. This is generic, so it takes a T. So mm, but it's similar to what we did. Takes in a T. So if you look at speak, takes in a T. Look at speaks. So then it returns. Let's say it returns something or everything. So, but it doesn't return anything. That's why I'm not putting it. Well, supposing it returns, so you can do complex thing. So type narrowing is, or actually is a very important concept, and this is used for all this union type, type system, as in the generics. If we want to just get the type of a particular value, I think we've seen it to check the type of a particular value. So it is very useful when we are using any, right? Or when we have multiple data type. So and there are three ways to use it. Or basically there are two types, either the type of or instance of. So let's look at the type of. Right, so let's say let option equals to the column that we can have A, we can have a B, we can have a C, we can have a D. So let's say this is our possible option equals A. So we can see it is type state. So let's say if option if into D is no determined, when D if type of D equal to yeah. So the comparison sorry, what's that? Okay, I can only use type of with string, number, big int, and like. But supposing we can use it with it, it should work. So let's say I change it to string or number. Sorry, because it's going to work now. So it doesn't work with our complex type. Well, supposing to work, we'll check if this is part of this thing. If it doesn't work, then we know what to do. Maybe return an error. So that's how it works. So the next one is going to be if. So this works with object, right? If option is so so the condition for us to use the instance of is that we must know the type beforehand. So I can say bit dot now. Right, so this is to print out the current date. So if current date, let's put that option. If option, I'm going to try it with type of D. So let's say print log. hmm, If option is the type of date, log. Let me try this. Then I'm going to run it. All right. So is it a type of is the type of option? D is meant to be a type of date, but option is really a type of date. So you should be saying good and interesting. So I'm going to run the dev. Okay. Okay. Sorry, my bad. So instances for objects. So we need to create a new location in memory. Don't just use a random location. So that is why. So as you can see, our date. This is an instance of the date class. So this is mainly with classes and objects. Okay, so we can use our parent class and our derived class. Maybe if dog is an instance of animal, so true or false. Okay, well, this is not going to print out because D is the type of D is not equal to the type of option. So not going to work out. So okay, so I think that's going to be type now. Wrong. Yeah, so that is going to be everything with TypeScript. So we're just going to see how we're going to apply TypeScript going forward. And so can you please stop the recording?